Hey everyone, welcome to the Fantasy Pros Dynasty podcast. I'm Pat Fitzmaurice. Find me on Twitter at Fitz_FF. And my co-host Scott Bogman has abandoned me this week. Bogman is sunning himself down in Arizona, so I am sliding over from the passenger seat, grabbing the steering wheel. And who the heck needs Bogman? Because here with me this week are two phenomenal guests. And our topic today is 20 Dynasty trade candidates, buy or sell. Oh, wow, this should be a good show. And because I suck at math, you might even get a bonus Dynasty trade candidate out of this. So one of my guests comes to you from a faraway land of castles and kings and crumpets. It's Tom Strachan. We're very fortunate to have Tom on the Fantasy Pros team. He also co-hosts the Fantasy Sanctuary. You can find him on Twitter at NFL_T-Strack. Welcome, Tom. It's great to see you again. Now, I know you are an American football guy now. We Yanks have completely corrupted you. But do you support a particular club in the Premier League?
Well, these days I don't follow it whatsoever. Back when I first got into the NFL, I was playing football 3 or 4 days a week, playing soccer even. I was spending my weekends watching soccer all the time through till Sunday evening, when then you'd flip over to watch the NFL. But now I'm a one sport guy, all in on the NFL, and this just consumes everything about me when I'm not doing my day job.
Oh, that's good. I love it when we steal Englishmen away from their, native sports. And so we have our import with Tom, and we also have an outstanding domestic option with Jax Falcone. He is the very least droppable of the undroppables, which you can confirm for yourself if you visit theundroppables.com. Jax is also the host of The Undrafted, and you can find him on Twitter at Dino Game Theory. Jax, your Twitter avatar is one of my favorite movie characters of all time. It's Leon, aka the professional, the hitman with the heart of gold, who very nearly pulled off the greatest escape in cinematic history. Welcome, wow. Jax. Why is Leon your avatar?
What you just said, you just nailed it. My goodness, that was fantastic. That's exactly who he is, and that's exactly why. He's the simple assassin with a heart of gold. And that movie, I think we're maybe the same age. Are you over 25 years old by chance?
Maybe just a little bit, yes.
Potentially. So we come from that same generation. That was a great movie, and it was a little bit shocking, and I just fell in love with Jean Reno in that film, and it's a pretty cool looking avatar. I think I threw it up once, and again, some things just stick, just like the moniker.
Yeah, exactly, and exactly. It's Leon the Professional. If you haven't seen that, you have to go do it. It's a classic. All right,
Natalie Portman in her first flick at 12 years old.
Yeah, very young Natalie Portman.
Yep.
The plants, the cartons of milk from the bodega down the street. What a classic movie!
Good. So good.
Now, before we move on with the show, get ahead of the competition with our 2023 Dynasty Draft Kit at fantasypros.com/dynasty with expert rankings, trade advice, combine coverage, dynasty rookie profiles, position primers, and more. You'll have everything you need to dominate your draft for free. And upgrading to premium unlocks even more draft strategy content in our draft kit, along with access to our Discord, which allows you to directly interact with all of our analysts. Unlock the secrets to crushing your dynasty draft with our dynasty draft kit today at fantasypros.com/dynasty. Let's get into these buys or sells. Jax, you're up first. Who's your number one player?
Well, I'll take the one that you and I both had, and I said you couldn't steal him from me, and somehow you just gave me 8, and you took 6 of these guys, or whatever. But Cam Akers, I think, tale as old as time. Every summer we talk about how Cam Akers has a chance to be somebody, and who knows? He's burned us. He's been up and down, but I think that right now he looks like he's going to be the lead back of a very bad offense, but I don't care what kind of offense it is. His opportunity share toward the end of last year was huge. So if he can just sort of translate that and be a lead back, at his current cost, I think he's an absolute buy.
Yet now I know the Rams do not have the sort of draft capital where they're going to splurge on one of the top running backs in this class. But do you have any concerns? I think the Rams have maybe 11 picks overall in the draft and a bunch of day 3 picks. Would you have any concerns if they took someone late like a Dwayne McBride or a Sean Tucker, someone on day 3? Or does that pretty much, they're going to take someone? I mean, they need to fill out that running back room a little bit. Kyron Williams is about all they have. But I don't know. Would you be scared if they spend another pick on a running back?
Yeah, totally. I mean, but I think that's everybody, whether it's, up to J.K. Dobbins, Rachaad White, even Ramondre Stevenson is like a little bit like scary right now. I mean, there's a lot of Bijan to New England in the first round. So even some of the very, very top guys, in terms of like top 12 dynasty running backs are in a little bit of a tepid situation. It's really only maybe the top 5 or 10 dynasty running backs are in a secure spot. So, there's definitely concern, but I think his price is what is making him a buy. He's got that upside, but at the same time, you can probably sell down from one of the other fragile running backs to Akers plus profit, and who knows, you may end up with a better running back outright plus the pick.
Very good take. I totally agree. And I was really on board with Akers at this time last year. And then it was quite the story arc. It was a little bit alarming to see him in that Thursday night opener, not playing at all and being totally shoved aside in favor of Darrell Henderson. But man, down the stretch, he was just fantastic. Are you on board with Akers as a buy, Tom?
Well, generally speaking, I mean, I'm not looking to buy many running backs at this time of year. I think, it's a really, obviously different teams and different situations dictate things really, but I agree completely that I don't think the Rams are going to be spending a lot of draft capital on him. I think they're a smart team, and I think that they're very aware that they need to be putting most of their resources into the offensive line if they're really going to be a better offense this year. So I'm much more, if anything, I think that we could see improvement from Akers because he's going to be running behind a better line this year.
Very fair. All right, who's your first player, Tom?
So first off, I'm going to go with George Kittle as a sell. I think he's one of the easiest fades for me this year. Like, he had 11 touchdowns last year, which were a career high, but he had the second highest touchdown rate of any tight end with 50 or more targets. And so, in basic terms, a lot of his catches were turning into touchdowns. But in the 8 games where he had no touchdowns, he was averaging 7 PPR points. And I just think if you're banking on Brock Purdy being the quarterback this year, then obviously we know that there's a lot up in the air with that situation. The whole of the 49ers offense seems to be just really, it comes back to the question marks for quarterbacks. This offense is stacked. I don't think there's a scenario where George Kittle is going to get that many touchdowns again. And if he doesn't, he's going to be a letdown for fantasy. Yeah,
that's fair. And I saw something on Twitter the other day about someone comping Kittle to Travis Kelce as far as like per snap production, and it was like pretty similar, but maybe it was per route production. That was it. And obviously, like, Kittle runs a lot fewer routes than Kelce, so that's where we see the big disparity. Jax, are you on board with that? I mean, do you see Kittle as a sell, like even in maybe tight end premium leagues where everyone's looking for those high end producers?
I'm not sure I totally agree. I do agree one thing he said. He said that basically running backs in general are not a buy. I love that. It's so true. If you could, you're basically not buying running backs. But, even in my example, I said, swap one running back for another plus profit because you want to be selling running backs. I will say that, George Kittle had his lowest yards per game of his career since his rookie year last year, too. So he wasn't exactly lighting up the scoreboard with yards. So, we are a little bit touchdown dependent with tight ends. I'm not saying I'm against selling Kittle because he is going into his age 30 season. He's a violent player. And so, yeah, the shelf life could be starting to wean. But that is a very high-powered offense, well, supposedly anyway, that should score touchdowns. And we'll see who the quarterback is. That's a whole nother. Did someone have him on there? I think so. I think we're going to talk about him. But, I think you could make a case either way. The touchdown upside is sure to regress, but maybe he could see some increases in other spots there. And you never know. Touchdowns should be at least not nothing for a guy like Kittle.
Well, thanks for the segue, Jax, because I do want to talk about one of those 49ers quarterbacks. Trey Lance, for me, he is a buy. And I realize that in super flex leagues, the quarterback market is tricky because not everyone is sitting on a glut of 4 or 5 quarterbacks. And, it's sometimes these trades get made strictly out of necessity. Sometimes it's hard to the only way to get a quarterback loose from someone is to pry them from their cold, dead hands. And by no means is Trey Lance free in dynasty leagues these days, even with his shaky situation right now. But I think this is probably as affordable as he is ever going to be, and it's because the 49ers are jerking him around in a big way. I mean, what are we doing here, 49ers? Like, I know we're not supposed to question Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch on anything. Cough, cough, Trey Sermon, cough, cough. But the 49ers seem hell-bent on just having Brock Purdy be their starting quarterback. The final pick of the 2022 draft, granted, Purdy played really well over a 8-game sample size, but Trey Lance is still the same uniquely talented dude that they gave up a boatload of draft capital to acquire. Started 2 games last year, one in a rainstorm in Chicago, the other in which he broke his ankle. I realize Trey Lance is not bowled over the 49ers in practices, or else they'd probably feel better about him, but it wouldn't be the first time a quarterback in his early 20s has taken some time to consolidate all the talent and start figuring out NFL defenses. Either the 49ers are going to come to their senses and make him their starter, or they are going to trade him away to someone else. And granted, I would rather see him running an offense that has more skill position talent than probably any other team in the league. But hey, if he has to get traded to New England or somewhere else, that's fine too. And we're talking about a guy with Konami code rushing potential and serious arm talent, so I want in. What do you think about that, Tom?
Trey Lance is a tricky one for me because I was all in on Trey Lance when he came out as a rookie. One of the few college games I've been to in America was a North Dakota State game many years ago, so it is a soft spot for them. But like when he came out, I was all in on that kind of, like you said, the Konami code upside. And then it was like, okay, well, the 49ers traded up for him. He got all the draft capital, and he was in a team where they had all the bright minds who could unlock him, and it didn't happen. And then last year I was all in again. And then it didn't happen again, but not because of anything he did. So for me, I'm not buying him simply because I had an awful lot of him, and I've just had to diversify a little bit to make sure that I've got quarterbacks who are playing on my roster at the minute.
Jax, you're a little bit south of San Francisco, but you are in California, so your hand is maybe a little closer to the pulse there than
yes.
anyone else here on this show. What do you think of Trey Lance?
So I've been kind of the opposite of Tom. I've been out on Trey Lance at cost, not necessarily the idea of him as a potentially good player, but man, in dynasty startups from the beginning, he's been like a round 1 or round 2 superflex, obviously startup player. I don't understand how that's I could never push the button on a player that's a pure projection, never played a game before in his life, and have him at that. Even after his rookie season, he was there again, and that just felt very expensive. So this entire time I've been out, not on a player eval stance, but more on a value stance. And maybe right now is the first time I'm starting to think I would like to buy in. Maybe I'll buy a few of those Tom shares.
I think for me, it's like I definitely still believe in his talent. I still believe, much like Pat said, that there's a very real chance he can move on to a team and develop. You know, like going back to the end of his rookie season, Kyle Shanahan was saying he's learned the playbook. He needs the time playing now. And it seems that all that happened since then is he broke his leg. Yeah, it's like he didn't do anything to play himself off the field. And personally, I think that Brock Purdy might be an answer that the 49ers look to go with this year, but he doesn't feel like he's a long-term solution. I would really like to see Trey Lance have a longer audition for it, definitely.
And yet the 49ers...
I'm sorry. I didn't mean to cut you off. I mean, there is a lot of, like, I am near a lot of San Francisco 49er fans out here, and I've asked, like, just sort of casually, you know, hey, man, what do you think about the thing? You know, and a lot of them are just, they're all in on Purdy, and they're kind of like, yeah, whatever, just trade Lance. Like, the casual fan. I'm not talking about just the sort of fandom. So I think in general that they're not going to get a lot of like pushback from their fan base that they get rid of or bench Lance. I don't think that they're bought in. They just haven't seen winning with him. You know, they did see winning, and if you're a fan base that sees winning with Purdy, they're fine there. So I don't think it's a fan base issue. I don't think it's a media issue. I do think we're Dynasty nuts are a total different breed. We see this Lance thing. We understand the Konami thing. You say Konami to a regular football fan, like, what are you talking about? So, all these things are sort of digested in different ways from different parties. But I'm with you. I still see the upside, but it might be on a different team. I think it's more likely than not, I think he gets traded. I mean, if you had to bet, would you bet he's with the 49ers or with another team on opening week?
It does seem like they're going to trade him, and like the Darnold acquisition maybe gave them the safety to do that. So yeah, I mean,
weird.
I get it, and you're right, Jax, that we do, us Dynasty League enthusiasts are very swept up in draft capital and all that. So to us, like, Trey Lance is still this very valuable, or at least potentially valuable commodity. And, we're thumbing our noses at Mr. Irrelevant from the draft, who almost took the 49ers to the Super Bowl. So I totally get that. I mean, I don't know if I agree with the perception among Niners fans that he's the second coming of Joe Montana, but I can sort of understand their position on that. Okay, who's up next for you, Jax?
Who is up next for me? This is a good question. I will say Javonte. Well, here's a sell of a running back. I'm a sell on Javonte, health wise. And also we see this happen all the time where things change. Now we have a new coach. The team is selling, for crying out loud. I mean, there's just so much change happening in Denver that I don't think that Javonte is going to be given the promise that he was coming out as a rookie. There's just, that promise is gone. The promise that he's going to lead the backfield. I love Javonte as a player. Again, as a player eval, you're not going to hear a bigger Javonte Williams fan than me, but that doesn't matter. You have to be a Bayesian. You have to say, okay, first of all, the knee could be a problem. There's reports that he could miss the entire season. If you're going to get anybody to pay you any sort of value that is synonymous with a top 12 dynasty running back for a player that may not play this year, yeah, just go ahead and snap that up. I would be selling Javonte. Hey, sell Javonte down to Cam Akers plus something. I mean, that may be okay. Obviously I think Javonte is a better player, but if you can get enough on top to get off of Javonte, you got to do it at this point. I mean, a late first plus, a running back like Akers for Javonte, I bet you a lot of people would do that. And I think I'd rather the Cam Akers plus a late first.
Yeah, I need to move him down in my rankings because I agree with everything you've said, and he hasn't done anything to make us suggest that he's not going to be terrific if his health cooperates. He has looked good whenever he's touched the ball, but
heck yeah.
It just seems like the situation is not ideal, and this injury thing is concerning. Do you agree with that, Tom?
Yeah, completely. I think Samaje Perine's someone who I'm going to be aggressively targeting in best ball drafts this year, particularly sort of like in zero RB builds, because it just feels like he's going to have a very large role in this offense. We saw Sean Payton came out aggressively trying to recruit him to the Broncos. He had an offer on the table, the same from the Bengals, but chose to go to the Broncos because he believed in what Sean Payton was saying. Sean Payton was telling him, I always use two running backs. So it just seems like the chance of Javonte Williams returning from an incredibly serious knee injury and then becoming a 3-down workhorse, just that's gone. I mean, I got burned badly by J.K. Dobbins last year, and it's a mistake that I'm not about to repeat with Javonte Williams this year.
Yeah. All right, who's your next man up, Tom?
Ooh, let's go with DeAndre Swift. Speaking of running backs, the Lions, they just don't seem to particularly have any love for DeAndre Swift. I mean, they gave David Montgomery a 3-year, $18 million deal. They went out and they upgraded on Jamal Williams, who was such a pivotal part of their offense last year. They could have got Jamal Williams for a cheaper deal than they got Montgomery, but instead they went with Montgomery. I mean, if they'd signed somebody cheaper, we saw a lot of running backs take cheap deals, then you could talk yourself into, okay, well, maybe they're looking to give Swift more attempts, but it just doesn't feel that way. And over the last 3 years, he's had, in rush attempts per game, he's averaged 8.5, 12.0, 7.2. And it gets very hard to build an argument for him. And if you're counting on the passing game work for Swift, David Montgomery's better in the passing game than Jamal Williams, in my opinion. He had 9.3 yards per catch last year, which was more than Swift's 8.0. And he had a better receiving EPA per play than DeAndre Swift did. So I think it's going to be really difficult for DeAndre Swift to be as good as he was last year, this year.
Yeah. And it seemed like as if it weren't frustrating enough for DeAndre Swift investors last year with Jamal Williams scoring approximately 47 touchdowns from the 1 yard line.
Yeah.
Now they bring in David Montgomery, who's probably a better running back than Jamal Williams. And it just seems like they do not want to give DeAndre Swift that big a role. So are you also a seller on DeAndre Swift, Jax?
I probably don't have enough shares to sell any, but I may be looking to buy sneaky, actually, just because I think there's so much negative right now with him that he can be had pretty cheap. I wouldn't pay up. I'm not paying up. I don't think the prognostication is not, he's going to have a great 2023, but there is a possibility he gets traded. That is not a done deal. I mean, he could absolutely get traded and find himself some fertile soil someplace that values him. Things can change a little bit. I'd be betting on talent. He is healthy. It is vexing and it's confusing as to why they don't value him as a more of a Eckler style weapon, but that's the way it goes. They don't see him that way clearly. That much we know.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like the market is down on him, but it's funny. I look at people's dynasty rankings and he's still ranked fairly high, but I feel like he's at this tier break where he's either at the end of the guys people are excited about or at the very top of the just a guy guys. You know what I mean? So he's kind of an interesting one. And I think the value sort of varies on him from league to league and manager to manager. All right, I'm going to go out of order since we're on the subject of running back sells. And since he just came up a second ago, but J.K. Dobbins for me is a sell. And I'm sort of surprised by the level of enthusiasm that I've seen from him. And I guess it's based on the finish he had to the end of last year when he averaged about 100 yards rushing a game from week 13 to week 17. But I mean, I'm still a little concerned about him after, he has the promising rookie year in 2020, and then he has the devastating knee injury in 2021. Not just a torn ACL, but a torn LCL, a torn meniscus. I think there was a hamstring injury too. It was just messy. So then Dobbins comes back a few weeks into the 2022 season, is just flat out limping at times, plays a few games sparingly, has a cleanup surgery, and then comes back and looked great at the end of the year. So I think everyone is all systems go. I'm just not that sure. It's one thing for just the ACL. I'm not worried about Breece Hall's future after just a clean ACL tear last year, but those multiple ligament injuries always concern me. And the other thing is that J.K. Dobbins just doesn't catch passes. I mean, maybe he can do that, and we saw a little bit of it at Ohio State, but we've not seen the Ravens use him in that way. We've also not seen the Ravens really show any inclination to make him their bell cow, like they've paired him with Gus Edwards or someone else. So I just think he's maybe flying a little too close to the sun as far as his trade value right now in the leagues I'm in. Jax, what do you think about that?
Yeah, totally. Let me ask you a quick question. Do you have Rachaad White or J.K. Dobbins higher in your dynasty rankings? If you don't mind me asking,
I think I've got White higher. Yeah, they're close-ish, but I think I've got White higher.
So you'll like this, Tom. You can answer too. But I made this trade. I traded J.K. Dobbins for Rachaad White plus the 2.05 in this year's draft. So obviously a big win. And I think that's the kind of trade you're trying to make. Is if you can shuffle these guys around and pick up profit, you're just as well, And so that's what I've been trying to do in a lot of stuff. So just to put practice into what we're talking about, selling and buying these players, I agree. I'm a sell on Dobbins. Again, I love Dobbins. He's literally one of my favorite football players. I love him. But you're absolutely right. They don't target the running back. And, if you can make creative trades where you're selling that risk and getting profit and getting, who knows, maybe the better player out of the two, you got to do those as many as possible. Even if Rachaad White totally dumps in that particular deal, I still have the 205 to hopefully buoy me to something, some redeemable values.
Oh man, I love that deal. And before we get on with it, by now I think most of you have probably heard of Reality Sports Online, the powerful fantasy sports platform where owners get to build and manage their fantasy team like an NFL general manager. But the question is, have you tried it? It's time to go see what all the buzz in the Dynasty community is about. Free agency, multi-year contracts, a rookie draft, multi-team trades, franchise tags, contract extensions, first-round rookie options, automated contract and salary cap functionality, and much, much more. Think it sounds complicated? It's really not. The best thing about Reality Sports Online Fantasy Front Office is that it doesn't take any more time than a standard league. It just requires more strategy. So if you think you're among the fantasy elites, well, this is the platform to test your mettle. Still not sure? You can test out your general manager skills for free in a mock free agency auction. If you like what you see, use the promo code FantasyPros to receive a 10% discount on your team or league today. Fantasy just got real at realitysportsonline.com. All right, Jax, who's next for you?
Well, let's go with a buy, especially in Superflex. A lot of you guys play Superflex. I think Dak Prescott's a buy. I think he's on the edge of the sort of quarterbacks that we like in Dynasty. And you know what I mean? It's like all these guys we love, Herbert, Burrow, everybody, yeah, all right, great. And then there's a bunch of guys who are like, oh, they're too old, they suck, they're young, whatever. All these, he's sort of the linchpin of those two, groups of players. And a lot of times he's the last one taken. I think he's undervalued. He's contracted up. He's got Brandon Cooks and CeeDee Lamb. I think those are pretty nice weapons. Tony Pollard's there. They're definitely committed in Dallas to winning. So they're going to continue to surround him with weapons. I don't think he's going anywhere, man. And he's been, before the injury, he was on a pace to really set records as a passer. Now he's 2 years removed from that injury. Hopefully he can move a little bit better. Maybe we see a little bit of rushing upside. He's been really, really good. He had a little bit of a high interception rate last year, and that's really the only knock that anybody's got on him. So, I think Dak Prescott's a buy, especially in Superflex leagues. I'm just ready to see a big year from Dak and CD.
Let me throw a hypothetical at you. Let's say you were coming off kind of a bad season, but you do feel like your team is pretty close to contending. We're talking super flex. So you're holding the 102 or the 103. Would you give up 102 for Dak Prescott? Would you give up a
nanosecond? Yes. Yeah. In any league I'm in, no matter what my roster looks like, 102 for Dak all day long.
Okay. What about you, Tom?
Yeah, I'd do the same. I think that wouldn't take me very long to think about it all either. I think that the Cowboys have made some nice moves in terms of what they're doing with their players, bringing in Brandon Cooks. Yes, they lost Dalton Schultz, but I don't think Dalton Schultz was ever really a massive game changer. So it's not the end of the world. They've moved on from Zeke and his 17 touches a game on being able to give Pollard more. So I think although I'm not wowed by the kind of staffing stuff that's going on with the Cowboys, Dak, he's just, like Jack said, he's that tier 2 kind of quarterback. Last season he had 6 20-point games despite missing a bunch of games. And then the year before he had 9 of them. That's what you want at quarterback position. And, if I'm buying that for 102 instead of taking a shot on Stroud or Young to turn into that, I'm more than happy to do it.
Yeah. And I don't understand. There does seem like there was kind of a crisis of confidence in Dak Prescott last year, and I'm not sure it's really merited.
Agreed.
All right, Tom, who's up next on your list?
Well, let's stick with quarterbacks, and I'll go with Daniel Jones, who's a sell for me. I think this one's about exploiting value more than me being particularly down on Daniel Jones. He just signed that new contract that in theory could keep him around till 2026. But in reality, it could also just be like a 2-year deal. They can get out of it quite easily. He did really well last year at times, 700 rushing yards. It's a lot of rushing yards. We can't downplay that. I think there's only been 19 better quarterback seasons than that in the history of the game. But I just can't help but think that the rug could get pulled from Daniel Jones quite easily. He doesn't have as long a leash as some of the players. And if you look at on Keep Trade Cut, his value is the equivalent of the 105 or the 106 in the rookie draft. And I just think, whereas Dak for the 102 is a no-brainer for me, Daniel Jones for the 105, the 106, I'm starting to be like, okay, well, what's in the mystery box of that pick?
I think I'd rather...
Could be a boat.
It could be a boat, exactly. I personally would rather have Jones than the 105 or 106. What about you? Although, admittedly, I don't know if last year was his true level or not. I don't think his first couple of years were his true level, but I don't know if last year was either. What do you think, Jax? Would you take the chance of the boat or Daniel Jones?
Daniel Jones is the ultimate enigma. I mean, he comes out, we all, poo-pooed the draft pick and whether or not he was going to be any good. And he's kind of been, he wasn't all that good last year either. I mean, he just reduced his turnovers, he had 15 touchdown passes. It's not like he was like killing it. So I don't know, man. He scares the bejesus out of me, but Dayball somehow, is able to craft a game plan that sort of protects him. He ran the ball a lot last year, which is of course where the points came from. I don't have it in front of me. I'm going to take a quick peek, but here it is. Yeah, he had 700 yards and 7 touchdowns. He had 5 career touchdowns before last year on the ground. So, he was a complete, rushing quarterback last year, which was new. And, is that the Dayball effect? Probably. He had 120 rushing attempts in his previous 2 seasons. He basically had that. So again, I think this is an absolute, change in game planning around him. And that has created him to be a fantasy value. But I don't think he's, he didn't have weapons, but he hasn't, arrived as a passer yet. That's for sure.
I think just picking up on what you said there about him being an enigma, I think that's part of it for me. It's like, okay, if you've dealt with the Daniel Jones experience so far, this feels like a good opportunity to decide whether you want to get off or whether you believe in him for the next 3 years.
That's a great point.
I think my own perspective might be a little skewed on him because in the league I have him, it is a super flex, and I've got Joe Burrow and Mac Jones. So Daniel Jones is sort of my QB2, and it's a comfortable situation because I've got a true QB1 and I've got like a cushion behind him. But if Daniel Jones were my QB1, or if I didn't have a cushion beneath him, I would probably be a little more skittish about where I was with Daniel Jones and his future. All right, I'm going to go with a buy, Jake Ferguson. And Tom, you just talked about...
Let's go.
You just talked about maybe Dalton Schultz being just kind of a guy, and I happen to think Dalton Schultz is just kind of a guy. Now, it's possible the Cowboys could get in on one of these premium tight ends in a class that is loaded with tight end talent. Bring, Dalton Kincaid or Michael Mayer to Dallas, and maybe I'm a little less enthusiastic about Jake Ferguson. But we are talking about a pretty low price for the guy right now. I think he's even unrostered in some dynasty leagues, although no way should he be unrostered. This guy was, as a University of Wisconsin alumnus, I can attest, this guy's really good. And like Schultz, he's not super athletic, but he is, he was a key part of the Wisconsin passing game, led the Badgers in receptions his last 2 years there. Tough dude, good at making catches outside the frame of his body, which he often had to do since he was catching passes from Graham Mertz. And there's no guarantee that he is the guy ahead of Peyton Hendershot, who also played some for the Cowboys last year, but Ferguson did play 44% more snaps and had 50% more targets than Hendershot last year. So I do think he is the incumbent right now, and I think there's sneaky tight end one potential here. Do you guys like Ferguson as a sneaky ad in Dynasty? Jax?
Yeah, sure. He's got touchdown upside, which is all you're really looking for. His profile, you just can't lie to yourself, right? And you even mentioned it. His profile is not that of an elite tight end. So even if he starts to kind of hit, your ceiling is Dalton Schultz, and so that's fine, and that is a tight end one. Tight end one is not hard to do. I think the difference, we did it last year, what was the difference between like tight end 8 and tight end 25 was like 1 or 2 points, per game, it was like, really not a big difference. So, anybody can get in there with a little bit of touchdown upside. So you're betting on a starting tight end, hopefully, on one of the best offenses in the league. Certainly I've heard worse bets to make, especially at his cost.
Tom, where are you on Ferguson?
Yeah, it's low cost, medium sort of upside, isn't it? I think, in a lot of leagues, when Schultz moved on, you saw one person would grab Hendershot and one person would be grabbing Ferguson, and each would be feeling like, haha, I've won this one and stuff. But really, it could go either way. Ferguson won game last year where he got more than a couple of receptions. I think he had 4 and finished as tight end 8 on that week. And, that's all we're kind of really after. He had 4 and a touchdown. So I definitely think that Dak is the type of quarterback who can lean onto a tight end. And I don't see any reason why it couldn't be Jake Ferguson. And I think, you can look at the kind of this class where people are talking about, okay, well, it's a great tight end rookie class. It's making it slightly easier to acquire these low cost tight ends who, people see as roster cloggers perhaps, or they don't see an immediate path to fantasy relevance in the way they might be hoping these rookies are. So he's definitely somebody that you can be adding into trades and stuff, just sneaking in there where it's like, oh, okay, well, I'd like that player. Can you just throw in Jake Ferguson as well to sweeten the deal?
Well said. Jax, give me another buy or sell, please.
Yeah, that's the way to do it, is as a throw-in. That's the smart way to get these guys that you want, make a bigger deal, but have him as a throw-in. Brilliant. Speaking of another guy, one of Daniel Jones's alpha receivers who could also be a throw-in a deal, Isiah Hodgins. I mean, it's got to be somebody. It's going to be Darren Waller. It's going to be Saquon Barkley. We understand that, but it's got to be somebody. And they've got, let me count here, 72 slot receivers on the team right now signed. They really do. It's incredible. All of them are either terrible, injured, or both. I mean, it's just an incredible poo-poo platter of talk about throwing spaghetti against the wall and seeing what sticks. That is what the New York Giants are doing at receiver, but they made it a priority. Their first free agent signing, their first order of business was to get Isiah Hodgins signed. And they signed him to I don't remember what it was, like 2-year $11 or something, like 2-year $12 million. It's not nothing. It's not nothing. And so I think he is part of their plans. And I don't know, he's definitely very, very free right now.
I kept watching Giants games late last season and thinking, like, is it just me or is Isiah Hodgins actually good? Like he just looked good. Tom,
right.
Do you agree?
Yeah, definitely. I think, for me, I was quite in on Richie James in DFS a lot because in PPR formats, it was such a, he had some really good weeks, but Hodgins kept being the one who I wish I'd played at times as well. And they both played far better than you could have expected them for two wide receivers who were not known commodities really to just come in cold and really play through the season. But much like Jack said, I mean, Hodgins, he only played over 20% of his snaps in the slot on 2 games. The rest of the time he wasn't in the slot, and that slot area is going to be really condensed. It's going to be very difficult to decipher. I'd be very much in on Isiah Hodgins this year.
All right, Tom, who's your next man?
Okay, let's go to George Pickens, who the internet might be a bit mad with me for suggesting him as a sell, but I always just kind of feel that through his career so far, it's been a story of big plays, but it's not been big points. He finished as the wide receiver 55 in half PPR, and he had only 2 performances over 15 points in his rookie season. So what he did do was incredible. Some of those catches, I'm not downplaying them at all. And I think he's one of those personalities who's great to root for. But I think because of that, there becomes a little bit of a cult status to him. And people who have Pickens on their teams, they believe in him heavily and they don't want to trade him for anything other than the top price. But, I mean, he averaged 4.9 targets per game. And from week 7 onwards, he never had more than 5 catches in a game. And I think the whole Steelers offense is going to take a step forward this year. I mean, Kenny Pickett's touchdown rate was ridiculously low. That has to positively regress. But I think if we're writing that in for him, it's fair to expect Deontay Johnson to maybe catch a touchdown again. Pat Freiermuth, we've seen be good. And looking at trade values, you could go out and you could trade George Pickens straight up for Marquise Brown or Treylon Burks, and I'd be doing that every time.
Jax, I saw you nodding your head enthusiastically. You're on board here.
I did this. I did that.
Yes.
So I've sold George Pickens in multiple spots. One of them was you're going to hate this one. I sold George Pickens and a 25 second. So I gave up George Pickens and a 25 second for Marquise Brown and a 25 first.
Oh my goodness.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. And then the other deal I did with Pickens selling him. Look, you mentioned it. It's a cult. I love George Pickens. He's like another one of my favorite players in real NFL. But that also means that he's probably other people's. He the thing with him staring at the TV with the hood on. That was awesome. I mean, who can not like this guy? But because of those reasons, he's overpriced. And you're right. So I sold him in another deal. I got. I ended up getting Chris Olave back. All I know. I don't remember the entire deal, but it was definitely. I think I sold Tua and got Jimmy G, Olave, and a first for like Tua and Pickens or something like that. It was a great trade. Another one. So, these types of deals where you can use Pickens to increase your team's value when there's no guarantee that Pickens is actually going to fire as an elite fantasy player. I actually think that it's almost a solved equation with Pickens is going to be a solid NFL player. That's done. We're sure of that. He's a blocker. He's an outside winner. But I don't know exactly, to your point, how many targets he's actually going to see at his ceiling. I just don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I too was mesmerized by some of the highlights, the contested catches, and you mentioned it, Jax, the blocking. I mean, he just bullies some of these smaller cornerbacks. It's fun to watch. But then you dig in and you look at it, just like, is he a target earner? He certainly wasn't last year with like a 15-point-something% target share. Can he separate? He was one of the worst in that, according to Next Gen Stats. Can he make yards after the catch? No, he was very Mike Evans-like last year, just 2.0 yards after the catch per reception. So, yeah, I've got some issues with him. I'm going to get to something related in just a minute here. But before we move on, subscribe to the Fantasy Pros YouTube channel and comment below on this video, because when you do, you could win a free upgrade to Fantasy Pros Premium. Whether you're looking for custom mock drafts, salary cap draft tools, or in-depth analysis of your fantasy performance, Fantasy Pros Premium has the tools to help you win. Unlock the most powerful fantasy tools in the industry. Don't want to wait for the giveaway? Sign up today at fantasypros.com/premium and start playing smarter, not harder. And to those of you who are already part of our YouTube audience, drop us a line, leave a comment, and subscribe, and then click the bell so you'll be notified about all of our latest podcasts, live streams, and videos. All right, gentlemen, I'm going to go with Kadarius Toney as a buy here. And, we just talked about George Pickens and his 15-point-something% target share. Kadarius Toney has played 445 regular season snaps in his 2 seasons, and he's been targeted on 17.3% of his snaps. That's not a 15-point-something% target share, 17.3%. That's on his snaps. Last year in the playoffs, he played 30 snaps and had 10 targets. Like, this guy is on the field, he's getting the ball, and that's because he gets open. He's a freaky athlete. Yes, he's gotten injured. I think he's already hurt like 47 different body parts in 2 seasons. However, he is right now being priced as a guy who is inevitably going to get hurt. That's simply how he's priced. It's baked into the price. And my goodness, if we actually do get a healthy season out of this dude, not only is he insanely talented and drawing targets at just a freakish rate, he's catching passes from Patrick Mahomes in an offense with the plays being designed by Andy Reid. So I am, I'm seeing the rainbows here with Kadarius Toney if somehow this guy can stay healthy. And if he doesn't, who cares? Because he's so inexpensive right now just because people expect injuries. What do you think, Tom?
I think as a community and as fantasy football players in general, people get far too confident in their ability to project injuries. And, we saw it last season. Jonathan Taylor, who'd never missed a game going back to high school, suddenly misses time. Meanwhile, Christian McCaffrey, who people didn't want to draft, suddenly goes out and has a healthy season. So I'm always I don't like buying in too much to the whole this player's injury prone stick. I think Kadarius Toney's the type of player that I've got a rebuild on a truly awful team. It's spiraled and so bad that we did a video on it and how I'm going to have to take risks to turn that one around because I need them to pay off. And at the current kind of prices of a mid-second for him, I think that's the kind of player you want. If you're in a rebuild and you're lacking a little bit of value, he's the kind of player that you could easily turn from a mid-205 this year into sort of like 109 next year. And it doesn't really matter whether he's a long-term player who turns into the wide receiver 1 because he is going to flash and he is going to have these huge blow-up games thanks to Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid. And, at the end of the day, Dynasty is about acquiring assets and turning them into more pricey assets, which you can move on.
What about you, Jax? Is he for everyone, or is he just for certain situations in Dynasty, certain types of teams?
I got to tell you, he's not for me. He's not for me. I think at the, I can't get with Kadarius Toney. I appreciate what you mentioned about his opportunities per snap, which makes sense, but I don't think that's extrapolated, because I think that they do scheme him looks, because I just don't think he's he's Pinocchio. He's not a real boy. He's not a full-fledged real wide receiver. He's just a guy that you can put in, and he's a real athlete. He's a really amazing football player in a lot of ways, but he's not a full wide receiver. He can't do everything for you. And I don't know when and if he ever gets to do that, or if he's just more of a gimmicky player. And he, look, keep trade cut isn't the Bible, but I'll just read you the players he's going ahead of in keep trade cut: Elijah Moore, Keenan Allen, Cortland Sutton, Jacoby Myers, his teammate Sky Moore, Tyler Lockett, Gabe Davis. I think I like a lot of those guys, if not all of those guys, ahead of Kadarius Toney. And for that reason, just value-wise, he's a sell for me. But I also see that he has a much higher ceiling than many, if not all of those guys, if he does turn around those raw skills into, on-field every down play. I'll give you that.
I will argue Kadarius Toney over Fool's Gold, Sky Moore till the death, but I got to give you credit for the Kadarius Toney Pinocchio analogy.
Yeah,
that's pure gold. All right, while you're on a roll, Jax, who's up next for you?
Let's go. Hold on, let me look here. Who do I want to do? Let's do Antonio Gibson. Yeah. Antonio Gibson should be a buy. He's also kind of been the forgotten man. I made an incredible trade for him at his depths last year. I think it was like Eno Benjamin for Antonio Gibson when Eno was starting. Everybody was giving up on him and trading him for the likes of that. I don't know that he's fully recovered. I think Brian Robinson's a great meat shield for him too, because I don't think that Washington is going to go out and draft a running back with high draft capital, considering the fact that they have both Gibson and Brian Robinson in tow. Brian Robinson, an early down back. J.D. McKissick. I mean, at some point we've got to find him, on the road in the rearview mirror as roadkill. I mean, he can't be coming back at all, and so he's going to be the pass down back. You would think he has a 3-down, skill set and profile. So he has upside that, could be found next year. It's possible. So we'll see exactly how much of a ceiling he has, but I think at the very least, he's at least a part-time player, and he's fallen way, way down most people's ranks. And I think he's very, very easy to acquire. And just that sort of floor of a backfield split with the ceiling of very, very high production. I'll buy some Antonio Gibson where I can find it.
Yeah, Gibson is polarizing, Tom. Where are you with him?
Yeah, definitely. I think a lot of what Jack said made a lot of sense. Like, he is so cheap to acquire right now, but for the right team, I don't hate it. I think I struggle a little with it because I can see a path to the Commanders taking a running back and then moving on from Antonio Gibson. I think, it's kind of hard to get out of my mind the images of Antonio Gibson fielding punts in practice last offseason, and then he didn't really do anything overly impressive last season. I mean, neither him or Brian Robinson were particularly good. But where I'd give Gibson the slight edge over Robinson is that Robinson just seems to be a zero in the passing game. So if I had to take one of them, I'd be betting on Gibson out of the two of them.
Yeah, I mean, Gibson is as big and as fast as Jonathan Taylor. He's a converted college wide receiver, and he had double-digit touchdowns in his first 2 NFL seasons. And oh, by the way, like if Scott Turner had kind of soured on Antonio Gibson, here comes Eric Bieniemy to maybe give him second life. So I'm optimistic that Bieniemy is a little bit more proactive in using Gibson than Scott Turner was in his final season with Washington. All right, I'm going to go with Deebo Samuel as a sell.
For sure.
Yeah, Deebo was, for one thing, I mean, he was slightly overaged when he came into the league. So even though it doesn't seem like he's been around that long, he's already 27. And I just think the 1,400-yard receiving season he had in 2021 was just, like, people still remember that, but it was a one-off, purely a one-off. I mean, Deebo averaged less than 50 receiving yards a game last season, and there's so much in-house target competition with Kittle, Ayuk, McCaffrey, and there's also really no reason to feature Deebo in the running game anymore now that they've got McCaffrey and Elijah Mitchell. So as much as I love this dude's game and think that there are just very few players more electric with the ball in their hands than Deebo, his perceived value is greater than his actual value. Are you with me on that, Jax?
100,000%. I mean, in another one of these guys where it's like one of my favorite players in the NFL. I mean, Dobbins and Kittle and Deebo, these are like my favorite guys. I love these dudes, but that doesn't make Pickens. Oh, love these guys, but that doesn't make them good fantasy assets. And I think Deebo is way overpriced. He was underpriced coming into his big season, and everybody was Ayuk, and Ayuk's the better quote unquote wide receiver than Deebo, but Deebo's a hell of a football player, and he had a lightning in a bottle season where he ran the ball 60 times. Like, think about that. He ran the ball 42 times last year. I mean, again, they're using him in that rush game, so he does have touchdown upside. But look, that's also a reason why he could be injured, and he can miss games, and he can be nicked up during games. And a target is more valuable than a carry, and this dude's wasting a lot of his energy on these low calorie carries. Easy for me to say.
Yeah, Tom, Deebo.
Yeah, completely. I mean, like Jack said, he was still rushing the ball last year. It was exactly the same amount of attempts per game as in 2021, but he was less productive with it. He was getting less yards. His rushing touchdown rate dropped because so many of those touchdowns in 2021 were big, freaky touchdowns that looked like they weren't going to continue. His percentage of 10-yard runs dropped last year. He only picked up 8 first downs on 41 attempts, so it's not like he was really doing a great job with rushing work when he got there. And yeah, those kind of near line of scrimmage receptions that he was feeding off, CMC's taking some of them away, and it just seems very hard to project. I feel like my struggle with this offense would be a lot easier to get over if perhaps Brandon Ayuk was moved on, and then you only had like Juwan Jennings or one of the other depth wide receivers on the outside. Then they would have to scheme more to Kittle and Samuel, but for now, both of them are a screaming sell for me.
Agreed.
Yeah, and what's interesting, if they did trade Ayuk, both Kittle and Deebo's value would skyrocket, which would make them probably even a bigger sell at that point because you could sell them for more. So, it's funny how it is, but it's probably true. I mean, for redraft, obviously they'd be very good plays, but I think for those same reasons, they'd be sells.
All right. Let's go rapid fire with these last few, gentlemen. Jax, who's next for you? Give me an elevator pitch.
Yeah, elevator pitch. I mean, DJ Moore sell just because the Chicago Bears had 377 pass attempts, not Fields. The Bears had 377 pass attempts last year and 2,200 total passing yards. As a team, that needs to go way up for DJ Moore to hit his ceiling. I'm sure it'll go up, but boy, oh boy, DJ Moore. Yikes. I love DJ Moore.
The great thing is there are at least 3 DJ Moore fan club members in every league, so you're never going to have problems finding a market for him, but I totally agree. I mean, he's on a run-first team with a run-first quarterback right now, so hard to see any way around that. Tom, who's next for you?
I'd go Rachaad White. I think a lot of people will be on either side of a coin with this one, but much like Cam Akers, he's got a very straightforward path to having an awful lot of touches this season. I mean, last year, Leonard Fournette had 261 touches, White had 175. It seems like if they were going to bring in Zeke or bring back Fournette, they would have done that already, and I don't believe the Bucs are going to spend big draft capital on a running back because they're kind of in a soft rebuild. They need to allocate those resources elsewhere. And even if they do add somebody, I think it'll be late enough that we could still see White have 250 touches this year.
Well, we know Jax agrees with that because he just got Rachaad White for plus tax for J.K. Dobbins, and I don't get why there's not more enthusiasm for a guy who's just has such a great 3-down profile. I'm going to go with a guy as a sell who does not have a great 3-down profile, A.J. Dillon. I was really into Dillon a year ago, and I ended up with him in multiple Dynasty leagues, and now I am out there selling like the Al Pacino character in Glengarry Glen Ross. I'd hoped Dillon was going to be more than just this between the tackles grinder after he had a very efficient pass catching year in 2021. He had a 92% catch rate and averaged 8.5 yards per target. And look, I knew Dillon was never going to be a high volume pass catcher, but if he could at least provide some efficiency there and a little something in the passing game. But then last year, not much, 28 catches, 206 yards, a 65% catch rate, just 4.8 yards per target. Now Aaron Rodgers is gone. That offense is going to be worse with Jordan Love at quarterback, and I just don't think the Packers are going to have as many run-friendly game scripts as they enter this retooling phase. So I just think Dillon has limited value in any PPR format, and this is the time to move on. All right, Jax, who's next for you?
I think make sure I get my last one in, but Isiah Pacheco, sell. I love this Isiah Pacheco. What a fun runner. But I think there, as a seventh round pick, it's just way too eerily similar to the James Robinson situation where everybody loved the player. I love the player, but he's guaranteed nothing going forward. I think he's probably going to be a pretty good player for a long period of time, but I don't think he's ever going to command a backfield. I may be wrong about that, but it could be way worse than that too. They could certainly replace him in the draft, as they kind of have cleared the decks in the backfield. It's like Clyde Edwards-Helaire could come back. He's also he's actually probably not even as good as Isiah Pacheco, but he's got the draft capital. He might get an opportunity over him. So, there's a lot of, questions around whether or not Pacheco will be tethered to any opportunity going forward, despite how good he's been.
All right. And speaking of clearing the decks, I think we're down to just tight ends on our list. And Tom, you've got two. You want to just give us both barrels right now? I think you've got one buy and one sell.
Let's go, baby. I love one of them.
I'll give you the buy first. Juwan Johnson.
Let's go.
Breakout season with Andy Dalton of all people. 7 touchdowns were only behind Kittle and Kelsey last year, tied with Taysom Hill, but we don't need to talk about him. We've seen Andy Dalton's moved on, but Derek Carr's there, and we've seen Derek Carr be productive with tight ends, whether it was Foster Moreau or Darren Waller, whether it was under John Gruden or Josh McDaniels. Derek Carr was a quarterback who doesn't mind targeting his tight ends. I think in terms of current trade value, Juwan Johnson is round about 305 or 306, which, I would rather take that than any kind of pot shot if you're trying to get a tight end in the third round of your rookie draft. I would much rather bet on somebody who was a former wide receiver and just come off a 7 touchdown season. In terms of my other one, I got Evan Engram, who's a sell. I'd find it easier to be on board if the two teams had actually come to a contract extension already, but playing on the tag, I kind of worry about where he might end up next year. I really don't enjoy betting on tight ends who are moving teams. He had 42 targets over the last 5 weeks of the season, which feels like we're perhaps just banking on that end of season production a little bit. He only had 3 games over 15 PPR points all season. And, Calvin Ridley's coming back. The team seemed very excited about him. They didn't use Evan Engram a huge amount in the red zone. I think he had 9 red zone targets last year, which, to put it in perspective, Josh Oliver, who was a blocking tight end for the Ravens, had more than that.
Yeah, and Juwan Johnson, I saw the enthusiasm with Jax there. And just one thing that worries me, I thought I heard a Saints beat writer say that the Saints were maybe kicking the tires on Foster Moreau, who you just mentioned, which would be, it wouldn't be ruinous to Juwan Johnson's fantasy value by any means, but that would be kind of annoying, I think, for people who are enthusiastic about Juwan Johnson. All right, Jax, close us out. Who's your final guy? And I love this one, man.
Yeah, you got to end it with Chig, right? Everybody loves Chig. I wonder, I'll ask Tom, would you trade Evan Engram for Chig, Okonkwo?
Oh, yeah, definitely. Chig was so exciting down the stretch there at the end. He had 2.5 yards per route run, which was not just the third highest among tight ends. It was the third highest among all pass catchers with 10 catches or more in that spell. So, yeah, all in on Chig.
Yeah, he's an exciting player. His profile is a little bit outside the norm for elite tight end play, but man, he showed it. And once you show it in the NFL, that means you can do it. And if they decide to go back to him, I think he's a buy. I don't know exactly how expensive he is. In some leagues, his price will vary dramatically, and for some, you'll have to pay up way too much. The owner who's rostering him now will be way too excited, so just forget about it. But in some spots, you'll be able to squeeze him into trades, and my, he could be. He's got ceiling, so I'm in.
Gentlemen, we advertised 20 Dynasty buy-sell targets. We gave the people 21. We over-delivered. I want to thank both of you for coming on. This was a great time. That's Tom. In fact, it was such a good time. I don't think I'm going to let Scott Bogman come back next week. So clear your calendars, guys, for next week. So you can find Tom Strachan's work at Fantasy Pros, and he also co-hosts the Fantasy Sanctuary. Find him on Twitter at NFL_T_Strack. And Jax Falcone is the host of The Undrafted. You can find him at theundroppables.com, and you can find him on Twitter at Dino Game Theory. Thanks again, gentlemen, and thanks to all of you in the audience. Appreciate your patronage, and we will talk to you again next week. So long, everyone.
Later, y'all.